10 years ago, the back and forth between Rubio and Trump over whose hands were bigger or smaller became one of the most sensational farces in American politics. Trump mockingly called Rubio Little Marco, while Rubio fired back by making fun of Trump's small hands. In American culture, this isn't just about hand size, it's a not-so-subtle jab at someone's competence and masculinity. Who would have thought that 10 years later, Rubio and Trump would be fighting side by side, overcoming obstacles together on the road to making America stronger than ever? It's Sunday again, time for our regular storytelling session. Rubio was once one of the youngest speakers in American history, carrying the aura of being the son of Cuban immigrants, and from the very start was seen nationwide as a future president. He has experienced both glory and rock bottom. From tearing each other apart and trading insults back in the day, to now being a powerful figure in the Trump administration, what has Rubio gone through over these years? Today, let's talk about Rubio's journey, from early success in his youth to falling from his peak, then enduring and refining himself, and finally making a dramatic comeback. Let's take a look at how this political golden boy, once the laughingstock of America and shattered in the mud, managed to rely on his resilience to turn the tide in the storm of his era and win back his dignity. In May 1971, Rubio was born in Miami. His parents were immigrants who fled from Cuba to the United States in 1956, and his family had very modest means. His father worked as a bartender in a hotel banquet hall, and his mother worked as a hotel maid and also as a stock clerk at a supermarket. To make ends meet, the whole family frequently moved back and forth between Miami and Las Vegas. During Rubio's childhood, his parents were always doing the most unnoticed menial jobs day in and day out. There was also someone else in the family who had a particularly big influence on him, his grandfather, Pedro. This old man had personally witnessed how his homeland, Cuba, was gradually destroyed by the communists. When Rubio was a child, he would often sit by his grandfather's wheelchair and listen to him talk about Cuba's history, how Castro came to power, and how freedom was lost. Many years later, you'll see that Rubio's toughest, most uncompromising anti-communist stance in politics comes from here. Rubio wasn't exactly a top student during his school years. After graduating from high school, he first went to a little-known college on a football scholarship. A year later, he transferred, eventually earning a bachelor's degree from the University of Florida, and finally received his Juris Doctor from the University of Miami in 1996. While attending law school, he worked as an aide for a Cuban-American Republican congressman, which was his first real taste of politics. In 1998, at the age of 27, Rubio was elected as a city commissioner for West Miami, a tiny city on the map with only a few thousand residents, almost too small to find. But it was here that Rubio began building his earliest political foundation. By day, he worked as a lawyer, and at night, he went door to door knocking on voters' doors. Thanks to this hands-on approach, he quickly built up a strong reputation in the community. After that, his rise through the ranks was nothing short of meteoric. 2 years later, in 2000, he won a special election to enter the Florida House of Representatives, and from there, he kept advancing without a hitch. In 2006, at just 34 years old, Rubio became Speaker of the Florida House of Representatives, making him the youngest and the first Cuban-American speaker in the state's history. In the Republican Party, where seniority and pedigree usually matter most, Rubio broke through all the traditional barriers. But what really made him famous across the country was the 2010 U.S. Senate race. This was the most legendary slaying the dragon moment of his life. At that time, standing in Rubio's way was a mountain that seemed impossible to climb. Charlie Crist. Crist was the governor of Florida at the time, a superstar backed by the entire Republican establishment, pouring all their resources into him. He had all the money and all the people he needed. The party leadership had already decided early on that he was their pick. This Senate seat was tailor-made for Crist. And as for Rubio, at the time, he was just a newcomer who had only started to gain attention thanks to the grassroots Tea Party movement. When the polls first came out, he was trailing by a full 35 percentage points. The party bigwigs didn't even bother to hide it. They called him directly to pressure him, telling him to be smart, drop out, and make way. For an average politician, this would have been the perfect chance to go with the flow and trade a withdrawal for a future cabinet position. But Rubio refused to back down. Years later, in his famous autobiography, An American Son, he wrote that when you're trailing by 35 points in the polls and the only people in the entire country who believe you can win are your family and 4 of your kids aren't even 10 years old yet, you'd better be very clear about why you're standing there. Not only was he clear, but he also keenly sensed a fatal political flaw in Crist at the time. In 2009, the Obama administration rolled out a massive $780 billion economic stimulus package to address the financial crisis. In the eyes of conservative Republican voters, this was a disaster, leading straight to socialism. But as a Republican governor, Crist not only publicly supported Obama, he even shared a warm embrace with him at a rally, right in front of cameras from all over the country. That very hug became the sharpest weapon in Rubio's arsenal. He kept replaying that footage over and over again in Florida's conservative districts, telling everyone, "Look, this is your governor. He betrayed your beliefs. He's not a true conservative." With no money for TV ads, Rubio just drove around in a beat-up car without even an assistant, traveling alone to every grassroots conservative gathering across Florida. He gave speeches in countless rundown community centers and church basements, and his voice started to stir up excitement among right-wing voters. Within just a few months, the situation was completely turned on its head. The once all-powerful Governor Crist watched as his poll numbers were gradually overtaken, and he completely panicked. He even announced he was leaving the Republican Party to run as an independent, just to get around Rubio. But by then, his momentum was gone. That November, in a final three-way showdown, 39-year-old Rubio won 49% of the vote. In this election that everyone thought he would lose, he made it into the U.S. Senate fair and square. That year, you could say Rubio rose to power by stepping over the political heavyweights in his own party. He was the hero of the anti-establishment movement, the future of the conservative wing. Media outlets across the country were exclaiming that this man was destined to be the next president of the United States. But here's something you need to remember, friends. The reason Rubio was able to win in 2010 was because he played the role of an anti-establishment outsider. And the most ironic part of history is that just a few years later, when he was on the verge of reaching the even greater prize of the presidency, he would be pulled down from that height by another outsider, one even crazier than he was. In 2016, Rubio faced the biggest gamble of his life, officially running for president of the United States. But to really understand what happened to him later, we first need to get a sense of the political climate in America at that time. During those years, voters were fed up with the establishment politics that had long been dominated by elites from both parties. With this mood in the air, the Republican primaries gradually split into two major camps. One was the anti-establishment group, represented by Trump and Ted Cruz. The other camp was the traditional establishment, represented by former Florida Governor Jeb Bush and New Jersey Governor Christie. As a newcomer, Rubio was pushed to the establishment side. As the election progressed, the establishment bigwigs even saw him as their last hope, counting on this young, eloquent elite to take on Trump, who was riding high and playing by his own rules at the time. But before facing off against Trump, the establishment had to go through a brutal internal purge to decide who would ultimately represent them as the sole candidate. At the time, Rubio had one fatal weakness: his lack of experience. His opponents had all actually run a state, while Rubio had only served one term as a U.S. Senator. He had never been in the top position where he alone bore the consequences of every decision. And this fatal flaw was exposed during the New Hampshire primary debate on February 6, 2016, by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who was also fighting for survival and desperately needed to win over establishment voters. At that time, Rubio had just come in third in Iowa and was riding a wave of momentum. His team even coined the term Markomentum. If he could win this round, he would secure his position as the sole establishment candidate. But as soon as he took the stage, he was relentlessly targeted by the seasoned governor, Chris Christie. Christie looked straight into the camera and called out Rubio's weakness. "You've never made any decisions of real consequence. We don't need another amateur rookie like Obama who only starts learning how to be president after taking office." The subtext was clear: "You're too green, step aside." Under intense pressure, a suffocating moment unfolded. As for Rubio, he tried to fight back with a pre-prepared line, basically saying, "Stop pretending Obama doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing." There was nothing wrong with what he said, but after Christie interrupted him, a flustered Rubio did something foolish. Rubio repeated that exact same line about Obama twice during the back and forth in the debate. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. In the following debate, Rubio went on to repeat that same highly similar line a third and even a fourth time in different contexts. For any politician, to have this happen under the spotlight of the entire country and the world is nothing short of a political nightmare. The next day, the national media exploded. The headline on a Boston newspaper was just one word: choke. The media immediately gave him a new, humiliating nickname, Marco Robot. When the results of the primary came out, Rubio had dropped to 5th place. Marco's momentum vanished overnight. Right at that moment, Trump stepped in. The nickname Little Marco started getting blasted at every one of Trump's rallies. Rubio, angered, began to hit back at Trump off stage, mocking his small hands and calling him a fraud, but none of it could change Rubio's Waterloo. He kept losing again and again until he was finally forced into a corner, retreating to his home base in Florida. He told his supporters that whoever won Florida would be the nominee in the end. But even so, he couldn't hold on to Florida. In the final showdown on March 15th, Trump defeated Rubio with 45.7% of the vote to Rubio's 27%. All 99 of Florida's electoral votes went to Trump. That night, Rubio stood on stage in Miami and announced he was dropping out of the race. Someone in the crowd started heckling, and he awkwardly made a joke to smooth things over, saying, "Don't worry, we don't get physical here." Then he said the line that would later be quoted over and over: "It looks like God didn't intend for me to be president in 2016. Maybe not ever." After he finished speaking, the lights went out. This man, once seen by everyone as a future president and a political star who rose like a rocket, hit rock bottom in his own hometown. Everyone thought he was finished. Most people would just disappear after a fall like that. At first, Rubio planned to do the same. After his crushing defeat and withdrawal, he announced that he was disheartened and would not run for re-election to the Senate, planning to leave politics. The door to Washington was already halfway closed. However, a turning point of fate occurred. A conversation inside a secret truck shattered Rubio's plans to retire, and 8 years later, propelled him to the pinnacle of American foreign policy power. On June 12, 2016, a massive terrorist shooting attack took place at a nightclub in Orlando, Florida, leaving 49 people dead. On the day of the shooting, Rubio rushed to the scene. According to his autobiography and later revealed details, Florida's Lieutenant Governor Lopez Carter pulled him into his pickup truck and said to Rubio, "Marco, the country is facing a security crisis right now. You have to reconsider running for re-election. The Senate needs you." This sudden disaster in his hometown became the catalyst for Rubio's return to politics. On June 22nd, just 2 days before the national registration deadline, he announced he was withdrawing his statement about not running and would seek re-election. That November, he successfully held on to his Senate seat. However, the Rubio who returned to Washington was completely changed. He began to seriously consider how to shed the label of being too inexperienced and only able to recite prepared remarks. He started to reflect on why he wanted to be a senator in the first place. He chose a path to break the mold by focusing deeply on China-related foreign policy. At this point, we have to mention the context of that era. As we know, for a long time, the mainstream China policy in Washington was engagement, the so-called panda-hugger approach. Both parties generally believed that as long as the Chinese Communist Party was brought into the global trade system and allowed to get rich first, it would naturally become more open and eventually as democratic as the West. In that kind of mild political climate, anyone who sounded the alarm about the Chinese Communist Party in Congress would likely be seen as out of touch or even a weirdo. But Rubio remembered the stories his grandfather told him as a child and became one of the first to shatter this false dream. He didn't just stop at slogans. He worked like a builder, laying down the bricks one by one to construct a legal wall in Congress. From Confucius Institutes infiltrating American universities, to the wildly popular TikTok across the US, to multinational corporations bowing to Beijing for market interests, he put all of them on his review list. The two most significant measures he pushed for both ultimately became official U.S. law, written in black and white. One was the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which he championed and passed in 2021, directly reshaping the global supply chain's entry standards. The other was legislation that completely barred companies like Huawei and ZTE from America's communications networks. The tide of the times began to shift in Rubio's direction. In 2017, Trump officially defined the Chinese Communist Party as a strategic competitor for the first time in the National Security Strategy Report. In the following years, the old playbook of engagement was completely torn up, and competition became a rare point of consensus between both parties. By 2020, because of his tough stance on the Xinjiang and Hong Kong bills, the Chinese Communist Party announced sanctions against Rubio twice, banning him from entering China. And just like that, the wheel of history pushed Rubio, who had retreated in defeat on that late night in Miami in 2016 and was mercilessly mocked across the country, onto a higher seat of power, making him an undeniable hardliner that no one could ignore. But there's still one more question. How exactly did he resolve his past grievances with Trump? After Trump won the 2016 election, Rubio was left with only two choices: either hold on to his old grudges and go head-to-head with the new president, or toss his personal vendetta in the trash. Like Basant said, on the field, you can play for your country together. Rubio chose the second option. During Trump's first term, the two of them worked together surprisingly well on many policies, especially in foreign affairs. Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, once commented on Rubio, saying that Rubio was someone who could actually offer solid foreign policy advice in the Oval Office, and, unlike many others, he didn't just try to flatter the president every time he saw him. But what really made Rubio one of Trump's own was a missed opportunity in 2024. In 2024, when Trump was picking his vice presidential running mate, Rubio made it to the final shortlist, and there was a lot of public support for him. But as we all know, Trump ended up choosing Vance. He was stood up at the last minute by a former rival who had become an ally. If it had been someone narrow-minded, they probably would have just walked away. But Rubio didn't do that. Not only did he stay, he actually worked even harder for Trump on the campaign trail, showing remarkable political maturity. He campaigned state by state, speaking fluent Spanish at Latino rallies to win votes for Trump, sticking with him all the way up to the very last day before the election. And it was precisely during those rough days on the campaign trail together that Trump and Rubio truly got to know each other for the first time. According to a mutual friend of theirs, the two of them had never really been close before. It was actually after the whole running mate controversy, while traveling together on campaign buses and private jets, that they bonded, talking about sports, political gossip, and eventually forming a friendship that went beyond politics. You see, this is the most touching and genuine side of the American power game. Former rivals who once argued fiercely on the debate stage are now standing together again because of a shared belief to make America strong again and never bow to authoritarianism. This is the friendship of true gentlemen, heroes recognizing and respecting each other. In November 2024, after the dust settled from the election, Trump officially nominated Rubio to serve as Secretary of State. In his statement, Trump was generous with his praise, calling him a highly respected leader, a powerful voice for freedom, and a warrior who never backs down from his opponents. On January 20th, 2025, the day of Trump's inauguration, the Senate voted on this nomination. The result was stunning: 99 votes in favor, 0 against, a unanimous approval. Rubio became the first cabinet member to be confirmed and the first to be sworn in during Trump's second term. 10 years ago, Trump called him Little Marco on stage and mocked him for being soft. 10 years later, it was still Trump who helped him rise to the top seat in American foreign affairs. Maybe this is the most fascinating twist of fate. American politics may be full of fierce clashes and extreme embarrassment on the debate stage, but offstage, your real abilities and true sense of responsibility earn my highest trust and respect. This is what makes a democracy made up of people so admirable and so inspiring. Look at that boy from Miami who once sat by his grandfather's wheelchair, eyes shining with a longing for freedom, listening to stories of how his homeland fell. After going through so much, he returned with a backbone that reality never managed to break, and now stands shoulder to shoulder at the forefront of the times with the man who once called him Little Marco. Together, they face an unprecedented era of change, building a stronger America side by side. I know that after hearing all this, my friends, you must have a lot to say, so share your thoughts with me in the comments section. Alright, that's our show for today. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give me a like before you go, and if you're new here, welcome to True Perspective. Please subscribe and help me out with this small favor, friends. Alright, let's wrap it up here for today. Thanks you all for watching, and I wish everyone a great weekend. See you again on Tuesday at the same time here on True Perspective. Don't miss it. Bye!